I just went to go see the Academy Award for Best Picture nominated movie, American Fiction, starring nominee Jeffrey Wright and Sterling K. Brown. The premise of the movie is that Monk, who's played by Jeffrey Wright, ends up writing a book that so obviously panders to more white audiences and their expectations of what black writing should look like. He doesn't typically write stuff like this. He's actually opposed to writing stuff like this in his character, but he ends up doing it for two main reasons. One, he's really financially down right now and needs money. And another reason is that he kind of wants to prove a point that a book like this is so ridiculous and people actually buy into it, even though, it's obviously ridiculous. And that's like the main source of the kind of humor in this movie. And honestly, it's really, really funny. I've typically known Jeffrey Wright to be more of a dramatic actor, but he does a great job in a comedic role. His delivery of lines is great, timing, all of that stuff is great. But I think the satire here is really what shines, and I think the actors do a great job with a great screenplay, bringing to life some of these biting jokes. It was one of the funnier movies of 2023, even though I technically saw it in 2024. One cool thing I think this movie does is it avoids cliches. There could have been like this down in the dumps writer who, there's a montage of him like finally getting inspiration and writing a book really fast. This movie kind of avoids that. It does it in a really clever and unique way. I don't want to spoil it, but that was definitely probably one of the funnier moments of the movie. But American Fiction also doesn't steer away from just the sorrow that this man feels in his life. He's got a lot of family drama going on, hardship going on with his mother and his sister and his brother, and the relationships are always rough and strained. And then this new girl that's in his life, that's a complicated relationship as well. Yeah, and I think this movie presents a lot of interesting story beats and character beats, and for the most part, effectively balances them all. Again, I don't want to spoil things, but there are a few of these story beats and character beats that feel a little bit rushed in how they're presented, or at least scattered, and I don't really know if all of them needed to be there, or some of them felt like maybe they were not given the treatment they were needed or the time they were needed. It is a pretty brisk movie. I feel like they could have allowed it to breathe a little bit more, give it a little bit more scenes or runtime, but again, that's just a nitpick. I don't really think that that's like a thing that ruins the movie or anything. This is definitely a dialogue driven movie. One of like the criticisms I would have of it is I don't think that the director really does a whole lot to make this film visually appealing. I know it's not like a big, visual effects movie or anything, but I kind of would have liked to have seen a little bit more creative camera work, stuff behind the camera. I think a lot of the scenes kind of pan out in a similar way. The movie does feel redundant after a while. But at the end of the day, again, those things don't ruin the movie. I just think, they're worth pointing out. But despite all those nitpicks, again, I will say that this is a really, really funny movie. The actors do a great job. The screenplay, again, it's biting, it's fun, it's genuine as well. It feels sincere. It feels like it was written with passion. And of course, the performances really make that screenplay come to life. And yeah, it's just great casting in general, great performances, great writing. One of the things that I think this movie did that was pretty bold and surprising was the movie's ending. And it's really, it gets you to think a lot. I can't spoil like what happens in the review, but it's one of those things where it's kind of like ambiguous. It doesn't give you all the details. It kind of takes that longing for satisfaction away from you, and it leaves it up in the air. And I think I respect the movie for doing that. It didn't 100% really work for me, though. I would have preferred maybe a little bit more of the gaps to be filled in just for the story's sake, because the rest of the movie doesn't really feel like that. It doesn't really feel like the rest of the movie is pushing for something so ambiguous. But again, there was funny elements of it, and I think there was an air of genius within it. I think it could have just been executed a little bit more thoughtfully. Overall, American Fiction is a movie about a pretty sensitive subject, but it does it handles it with grace. I think it's funny. I think a lot of different people are going to like this. It doesn't outright accuse everybody of being racist. It just kind of points out some legitimate things within, I guess, the book universe, but I think it can expand beyond that. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I had a good time. Wasn't my favorite movie of the year, but definitely one that I would recommend going to see. It's a good time. It's rated R. Maybe don't bring your young kids, but it's not like it's for, sex or nudity or anything. It's mostly just because of language. And there's one brief scene of violence, but that's really played for laughs. It's not really terrifying or anything. As for award season goes, the only one that I personally think it should be nominated for would be maybe screenplay. I do think Jeffrey Wright is great, but I just think that category is so stacked, and lead actor, I wouldn't personally nominate it there, but it did get the nomination. I don't really think he's going to win, but I'm not like upset about him getting nominated because I do realize it is a great comedic performance. And I think award ceremonies should give comic or comedic actors more support, especially in the lead categories. I'm going to give American Fiction a 7.5 out of 10.